Our first speaker is from Mexico. She has a bachelor degree in international relations and a master's degree in theology. She has worked in NGOs and education for over a decade. And currently she is studying in the licentiate program in social sciences at Angelicum. Please welcome our first speaker today, laywoman Maria Teresa Avila Fuentes.
So good morning, everyone. I also join the voices of Felipe and Loredana. Thank you. On welcoming you to the Lay Center. And it's my pleasure to present a topic that is dear to my heart, that I discovered a few years ago, that is a practical way to live synodality. And this term is called bridge people. So throughout the next few minutes, I want to tell you stories of people who have found a way to bridge between two different areas, two different cultures, ideas, and that they have been able to live synodality by stretching far beyond what was usual and comfortable for them. And so with that being said, I invite you to bring to your mind an image of a bridge. It can be one of these beautiful bridges that we have in Rome. It can be a bridge from our own native cities, or even a bridge from these movies we see of Indiana Jones or these very adventurous movies of the jungle. It can be a bridge made of wood, of steel, of metal, any material you want. But once you have it in your mind, give me a thumbs up that you have this image now. And let's think about characteristics of a bridge. For a bridge to be useful and not to be risky, it has to be on the edge, right? It has to be able to connect 2 points. It has to be solid, has to be firm, has to know the foundation where it stands on, if it's rocky ground, if it's kind of like sand-like, in order for these to infrastructurally and engineerily serve, right? And as in architecture, bridges serve to go from one place to another, to transport, to translate, to take ideas. Throughout history, we have had bridge people. And I first heard the term bridge people with this professor right here. He's Hofsman Ospino from Boston College. He's from Colombia, and he specializes in religious education and theology. And he used as an example for lay people, immigrants, second-generation Latino immigrants in the United States. These people, these young men and women, did not move from countries. They were born in the US. In their houses, they spoke Spanish. In the school, they spoke English, right? They knew how to move between these two cultures, between traditions, between ways of thinking. And they were able to translate for their parents and translate for their peers. And so becoming naturally bridge people. Naturally, but also like with effort, because becoming a bridge person requires intentionality. And so I want to present to you some characteristics of these people, of these types of persons that act as bridges. They normally will move in the frontiers. As we were saying before, they have to be on the edge, and being on the edge is risky. It's much more comfortable to be in an area where everything is known and not to be staring down at what's there, what's in the unknown for us. But these bridge people take this risk. And to explain these second characteristics of bridge people, I have to tell you something about myself. I'm very bad at math, at numbers. But there is a concept that I like in math that is very much related to bridge people. And this is the least common multiple. In Spanish, mínimo común múltiplo. So you take two numbers. I'm going to leave this here for a second. You take two numbers, for example, 118, and you take 324, right? And there will come a point when you multiply these two numbers, and you will reach a number that is the least common multiple. In this case, 1620. And why is this relevant for bridge people? There is a saying, a poem by Leopoldo Marechal, that says that from every labyrinth you can exit from above. So when you are watching a problem and you watch it from above, you can find the exit, the so these rich people don't have to be necessarily conservative, progressive, from the left, from the right. They're different in temperaments, personalities, but they are daring to, as the Synod says, enlarging the spaces of their tents and willing to see what is beyond. So without further ado, and under the theology of the people, I want to present to you 8 short stories of 8 people that have acted as bridges. These bridge people are founded in the theology of the people that Pope Francis talks a lot about. These theologians like Raffaele Luciani talk also about this. And basically, it's the idea that there is truth, goodness, and beauty in every human person, and that we have to be willing to find this truth, this goodness, and this beauty. And this theology then opens the door for every Christian to belong, right? And for every Christian to feel at home. It inspires us to scoot over and make space for those that are still standing, and for those still standing to feel welcomed at the table. And these bridge people, as we will see their stories, have found these connections, have found a way through which there can be enough space for everyone. Inspired in our Mother Mary, of course, that Fratelli Tutti cites as an example of a woman that bridged, right? Carried Jesus and bridged heaven and earth for us. And I'm going to read it just literally because it's beautiful. In imitation of Mary, the mother of Jesus, we want to be a church that serves, that leaves home and goes forth in order to accompany life, to sustain hope, to be the sign of unity, to build bridges, to break down walls, to sow seeds of reconciliation. And so this presentation is divided into 2. First, I want to present to you 4 cases of priests that worked prior to Rerum Novarum, this social encyclical that was the first in its type. Maybe you know them already. Maybe some of these are going to be new. But the different perspective that I want us to focus on is on how they were able to connect 2 seemingly different and unknown ideas. And so, the first one, Robert Lamennais, a French priest, for us now, it's very normal, and Centesimus Annus talks about this and other social documents and encyclicals, that democracy is compatible with Catholicism, right? And this is something that we see now as not controversial, not polemic, but back in the time, this was very controversial, right? Because there was this idea about monarchy and the divine right. And so Robert Lamennais starts thinking that Catholics and Democrats were not really that different. And his ideas even sparked the creation of Belgium, when he manages, with lots of other people, to join these 2 groups, Catholics and Democrats, into one idea. Nowadays, we also accept separation of church and state. Nowadays, it's normal for these 2 institutions to go like respectfully alongside, or each doing its own thing, but not mixed. But in his time, as a son of the French Revolution, as you can see, he lived in the French Revolution, post-revolution, Napoleon, Congress of Vienna, and the world was changing, as now, right? And so these kinds of people had to see, how is these changing things happening around us? How can the church connect to these events? How can the church connect to this idea of everybody having a voice, of everybody being able to participate, of they didn't have the language at the time of like human rights in the United Nations, but they had the rights of the man and the citizen. And so Robert Lamennais starts talking about this. And this was difficult. This proved to be very even, controversial for his own figure. His ideas are going to be challenged by first an encyclical, if I'm not mistaken, called Mirari Nos. He answers in a book called Through a Believer's Words, the words of a believer. And finally, he is censored by the church, right? And he takes a decision personally to leave the church. Even though he left the church, he paved the way. He bridged the way for what we now know regarding social issues, particularly democracy and Catholicism. The next person took a different approach, Antonio Rosmini, he was also banned. His books were also in the index of prohibited books. But he didn't leave the church, right? Two different approaches, two different ways that like rich people can react. And he tried to highlight the gap that existed between the lay people and the clergy, right? Lamennais, democracy and Catholicism, Rosmini, lay people and clergy. And he denounced what the Second Vatican Council is going to work a lot with, that there is not a connection or there is not communication between the clergy and the lay. And in this book, The Five Wounds of the Church, he talks about this that is hurting the church. He even tries to say that lay people should learn Latin, that the liturgy should be much more participative, but these are two dangerous ideas at the time. Nowadays, we recognize him as a blessed, right? He was beatified in 2006. And he's even cited, if I'm not mistaken, in Fides et Ratio by John Paul II, as an example of a philosopher that was able also to connect between two ideas. In this case, to bridge between the clergy and the lay people. The social bishop, Wilhelm von Ketteler, he dares to talk with socialism, right? During his time, the Communist Manifesto was written. The church, as you know, when Rerum Novarum appears, some people say, well, it took some time, right? Some people have been talking about these rights for the workers and about having one day off and limiting the number of hours and children not, for children not to work in these factories that were like all over in the Industrial Revolution. Wilhelm von Ketteler was talking about this prior to Rerum Novarum. He's going to be an inspiration for the social encyclical. And dialoguing with Ferdinand Lassalle, the founder of the Socialist Party in Germany. Risky, right? But needed. And so he manages to see how there were elements of socialism that could be connected to Catholicism. Not trying to merge them, not trying to say, oh, we're all the same, right? But actually being able to find the coincidences and fighting for this within the church, for the church to say that it is important for workers to have rights. And so, he's going to be known as the social justice bishop. He is mentioned by Benedict XVI in Deus Caritas Est as an example of a bishop that worked with social ethics. And the final example of a priest, and the only one that lived through Rerum Novarum and post Rerum Novarum, Georges Rutten, that is going to bridge worlds that sometimes are not controversial, but are difficult to combine. Academia and the social action. Sometimes there can be people that write a lot and talk a lot about social issues, and other people who act a lot. But it's difficult to find someone that will be able to analyze and reflect and also act. And so he's an example of this bridge between academia and social action. After being ordained a priest, he gets permission to study social sciences and studies the conditions of the miners. And he denounces the conditions that the miners were working in, like awful working conditions. He's going to do something that has seeds of synodality called the social weeks, where people from different contexts were able to talk in a horizontal way. Back in the beginning of the 20th century, this was like not very much heard of. And this idea of socialism, particularly communism, that change is only going to happen through class struggle, and Christianity's idea of peace, he's able to say, okay, where is truth in these two areas, in these two things? And of course, starting to promote what is now very obvious for CST, for Catholic Social Teaching, unions, right? That in the beginning, it was not very clear, like where does Catholicism stand regarding unions? So to make a small summary, we have Lamennais, democracy and Catholicism, Rosmini, lay people and the clergy, Wilhelm von Ketteler, socialism and Catholicism, and George Rutten, social action and academia, right? We have these rich people in different areas. Of course, we have laymen and lay women. How am I doing with the time? More or less, right? Okay, thank you, Lorena. And so I like Pedro Trigo, he's a Jesuit. He says that we sometimes forget that the first theologians were lay people. Origen, Justin the Martyr, and how laymen and women can also be able to see labyrinths from above. I discovered this character last year. I love him in Spanish. His last name is Boecio, right? Severinos Boecius in English, I guess. And he's going to bridge Aristotle and Plato and their works with the Roman world. Now, for people, it's very obvious to say, yeah, Aristotle, he influenced St. Thomas, and it's like extremely normal. But in times of the Roman Empire, it was like, the Greek? Like, what? They're pagan? How can we like bring these ideas into our culture? And Boecio is going to translate from the Greek, Aristotle and Plato, for the Roman culture to know about these ideas. He's also going to use math, astronomy, for the Roman culture. And this is going to get him into trouble because people are going to say that he's using math, you know, numbers can be dangerous, numbers and astronomy, against the Roman Empire. He's going to be in jail, going to be tortured, and eventually going to be killed. He's now regarded as a saint, right, Severino Boecio. And Pope Benedict XVI says something nice about him. He says that he was convinced that harmony between cultures and values was possible and considered his mission to reconcile and unite the classic and the Roman culture. So a bridge between these two cultures that cost him his life in a way. He wasn't like a martyr for the faith, but more for political issues, but still a bridge person. This next one you might have heard about him, Giuseppe Toniolo, that in a world prior to the Great Depression, where capitalism and the Industrial Revolution was everything that the world knew, he dares to say, hey, economy has to be also ruled by ethics, and not only by the market that will do whatever, right? And this was something unknown at the time, mixing ethics and economy, but he dares to do that, participates in Rerum Novarum, and also paving the way for Christianism and democracy. He was beatified by Benedict XVI and also worked in favor of unions. A layman, a husband, a father, and an example of how laymen, laywomen can do this work, like transforming the social structures in favor of the people of God. And I have two women, of course. These are all chronologically. So chronologically, the two lay women that are examples of bridge people came like more contemporary to our time. I'm sure most of you know her, Dorothy Day. She was an American journalist, an activist, a writer. In her youth, she was imprisoned several times because she really believed in these deep social causes. For example, votes for women, and when she was protesting about this, for women to get the right to vote, and she was taken to jail, right? She belonged to anarchist groups, even interviewed Leon Trotsky, moved in communist circles, was really passionate for social justice. And at some point in her youth, she discovers the faith. And she gets baptized, embraces Catholicism, and now has, trying to bridge these two worlds, social justice and the faith, devotion, piety, and also the rights for the workers and the rights for the poor. Someone within her communist circles said that she was too religious to be a good communist, right? Others called her the pious radical. But she, especially now, is an example of a bridge, especially in the US, between social issues and the faith. She and Peter Maurin founded the Catholic Worker, that was both a publication and houses for people that want to live in the distributist type of economy, very rooted in the doctrine of the church. And finally, Eileen Egan. She, also a writer, also a journalist, a lay woman. She participated in the Second Vatican Council, and she participated in Catholic relief services. She was a bridge, for example, for Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa in the beginning, 1950s, was not a known figure. And so Eileen Egan, knowing the bishops, knowing dioceses, was able to open doors for Mother Teresa. And especially, she was a bridge between this very much war culture in the United States and pacifism. She lived through Second World War, the Cold War, all of these proxy wars, Korea, Vietnam, etc. And it was difficult for a Catholic to stand up and say, hey, as much as we say no to abortion and euthanasia, we also need to say no to war and the death penalty. And so she serves as this bridge. She is among the first to talk about the consistent life ethic and talking about the seamless garment and how if every life is sacred, both the immigrant, the migrant's life is sacred, the person in jail life is sacred, and how we should protect all this. And I think my time is almost up. I want to end with this phrase from Fratelli Tutti that says, let us arm our children with the weapons of dialogue. Let us teach them to fight the good fight of the culture of encounter. And highlighting the place that we are in, the lay center, and highlighting all of you that are bridge people in a bridge institution that is an example of a place of encounter, a place where we can stretch and we can really love, understand, and build a community together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa, for this very interesting and motivating way of presenting. We can certainly say you have a lot of experience in presenting and teaching. And also because was really interesting to see this historical perspective of building bridges, which is also in a way the main thing in synodal process. This is very, very interesting. Yes, I would never thought about it, but building bridges, this is a key point. Very, very good. Excellent, actually. So I am opening now the space for you to ask questions or give a comments, anything you would like. Please, feel free. Joe.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. That was really, really engaging and interesting. I'm interested in, you gave lots of examples of bridges between the church and labor movements and workers' activism and things like that. Looking at the world today, I don't know, it's easy to feel like maybe some of these bridges are a thing of the past, and actually now there are less bridges between movements for social justice and church organizations. Do you think that's true? Do you have any ideas about, if it's true, what we can do to change it? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, very good question, Joe. And I think that this is something that is in our minds a lot, no? This polarization and how the fact that we are able to communicate better, sometimes we have said this a lot, it just closes us up in our own echo chambers, right? And so it's more risky because I think we now live in a very public world with social media to engage in this bridge building, because it's much more comfortable to be with my people, and just validate my people and resonate with my people, and daring to see another perspective. At least for me, it's it's gives anxiety, but I think there are people and institutions that try to maintain a safe space. I would say that is an important word, a safe environment where people will feel welcomed and not feel invalidated if they have a different position or if they have a different idea on a certain topic. I can say, for example, in Mexico, right now there is this initiative of, it's called Escuela de Líderes Católicos, and they are trying to take in different political parties that are from the right, from the left, and for them to talk regarding Catholic issues. And so that is a hopeful example for now that I know of in my country. And I know I said this before, but really the lay center, it's a beautiful example also in this sense.
Thank you very much. More questions, comments? Pedro.
Thank you so much. That was amazing and very inspiring, Tere. The first example you mentioned was actually Lamena, was someone that left the church, that in a way puzzled me at first as a kind of a bridge person, right? But I understand that by now we consider what he did, we take for granted, right? But I wanted to ask, in the perspective of people at the time, he might very well have been considered a failure, right? In terms of bridging people, perhaps just exacerbating the radicalism and so on. So yeah, it's a comment, but just asking for thoughts in general. How do you reconcile this tension of, in a way, being true to yourself and working for reform on the inside, right? And how do you manage this? So thank you so much.
Yeah. No, thank you, Pedro. Yeah, and I agree. I also, when I look at his life, and I'm a little like, he left the church. But yeah, like what he didn't evaporate with his leaving the church, right? So what he did really stayed for future generations. And I mean, I guess it depends. Like, of course, we would like for everybody to maintain the faith and everything. But like, this was also like a risky, passionate stance to take, right? As opposed to Rosmini, that he suffered like patiently the being banned and like for his books to be censored and stayed, right? So these are like two positions we can take. Perhaps we can learn patience, right? There might be some points when we are tempted to say it's enough, I've been too hard, this is not working, like why? But yeah, like to be patient, to trust in God's timing, but yeah, I echo what you say. It's like a difficult situation to be in.
So in a way, like when we talk about history and think about historical facts, they're also helping us to see the future or the position in which we are now. So what are experience or example of the bridge people in your country today?
An example of a bridge person in the past, first, that I like is, perhaps you have heard about him, is Anacleto González Flores. He was part of this movement in Mexico, the Cristeros, and it was a very polarized era in our country, no? When the government was persecuting Christians, there were those that said, we have to take the weapons, we have to fight against the government, and we have to kill, right? And the government, of course, was saying religion is fanatizing people, we have to end religion, so science comes in, and lots of trouble. This was in the 20s in Mexico. And this figure, Anacleto González Flores, ended up being martyred, so yeah. But he tried through peaceful means, through economic boycott, through even trying to dialogue with the government for this war to end. So instead of engaging in a war, for dialogue to happen. So I like this figure, Anacleto González Flores, a lawyer, a layman, also a husband, a father. And yeah, and now we, for instance, comes to my mind, activists of, bless you, activists of human rights, of indigenous groups in Mexico that are able to translate and to understand different contexts and yeah, to provide space for everybody to belong.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Ooh, so many questions there. Okay, Sister Judith.
Thank you for your presentation. It was wonderful. Your presentation made me think of a comment someone made to me about, how wonderful synodality is. And I thought, well, synodality is more attractive when you don't have authority, And so when you have authority, maybe you just want people to, kind of be quiet and do what you say. And so I think that's another discipline that we need to keep talking about with synodality is that, it has to have more content than people simply expressing themselves. It has to go somewhere. But secondly, there is an asceticism, I think, of anyone in authority. We're not talking just about hierarchy of people like that, but any person in authority has to adjust. Has to adjust. So it's just maybe more a comment, but your wonderful presentation elicited that in me.
Thank you, sister.
You want to say something? Before we go to the next question?
Yeah, no, thank you, sister. There was this phrase that I heard yesterday, and it's regarding this, that, when it had to do also with Dorothy Day and like her work, and how she even challenged the bishops, telling them this, that when you are in power, then you should be willing to yield more, right, than the poor people, right? Because it's such a disparity. So yeah, even she had lots of these encounters because of this authority component in synodality. Thank you, sister.
And we have time just for one more question. Even I see new hand raises, maybe two, but quick one.
I'm afraid it's not quick one, it's complex.
Okay.
We can talk over the coffee. I mean.
Okay, so if you agree, we can pass to, yes, please. The microphone.
Yeah, but can I pose it or?
You can, yeah, sure, sorry.
Because the thing is that, have you thought about like bridge communities or movements, orders? For instance, Jesuits. It's one thing in particular because they were very active. They wanted to not bridge, but were very active in various missionary environments and places. They were very modern and so on, etc. But recently they became somewhat less of a bridge. They rather, well, there is a discussion whether they succumb more to the spirit of the world or to gospel. So we can see it especially in Latin America and even North America, Western Europe, where Jesuits are in a kind of situation in which they have to like decide, and the bridge component is still there, but the question is like whether if you build a bridge, you actually go to the other side.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for your wonderful presentation. And it's a comment. Actually, when I was listening to your presentation, it's a kind of like, it took me to life of Jesus. And we are talking about synodality, and it's all about inclusion. Yeah. And yeah, you were explaining the bridge building, and it's all about, I felt, the inclusion. And we think that, that somebody else need to do this part. And but I personally, I feel that, first of all, that each one of us, the church and the lay, all, we need to, first of all, we need to include oneself. Then only we can include the others. And wonderful examples you gave. And in the world today, we can see that the many people, and they are fighting and they are raising their voices on behalf of the voiceless people. And they are doing a wonderful work to include the people into the system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for your presentation, and all of you for the questions. Really interesting questions were raised. We will continue in our coffee break also. So let's go on with our next. Yes, we can. One more. Thank you, Teresa.